Welcome back. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden has dropped his bid for re-election. This after weeks of pressure to quit and polling data suggesting that a victory is out of reach. President Biden has endorsed Kamala Harris to go head-to-head with former President Donald Trump in the November election. Political analyst Silke and Brooks Spector, who's retired U.S. diplomat, who's also with the Daily Maverick, join us now with their analysis of what's currently playing out in the U.S. and what it suggests for those polls in 4 months' time. Good afternoon to you both, and thank you so much for your time. Wonderful. Brooks, we will start with you. It's been quite a few, an interesting 8 days from an assassination attempt to, President Joe Biden deciding to exit the race. We knew 2024 would be an interesting year. It's been more than interesting.
Yeah, no, this is extraordinary. I mean, if you were to have said 9-10 days ago, how is it shaping up? You would have said, well, it's going to be a contest between two elderly men, both of whom collectively are not well liked by most of the population, and neither of whom are seen as entirely appropriate. Then one of them is nearly killed by an assassin's bullet, and he has a bump in not love maybe, but certainly appreciation and affection by certainly the people who support him. And it began to look increasingly like he was going to be certainly a successful candidate. And then over the weekend, when we were just trying to figure things out and how that was going to go, Joe Biden, the incumbent president, delivers a bombshell and takes the advice, the pleadings, the beggings of some people and decides he will not run. After all, he'll step back. He'll let his current vice president, be the candidate. He will endorse her, and we are now off to the races. And if you are a Republican, I suspect you now have to rewrite your entire playbook. It is no longer going to be Joe Biden is an old, tired man who can't really do this. And you now are going to have to somehow come up with a very different approach. Even if Kamala Harris is not the candidate, it's going to be a fascinating next couple of weeks.
Daniel, I'd like to bring you in here because, of course, just like Brooks says, it's not automatic that, of course, Kamala Harris would be the Democrat nominee. Let's talk about that and maybe who she might have to pitch herself against within the Democrats.
Yeah, it's not automatic. I mean, clearly, she's the front runner. She was endorsed by Biden in his resignation Twitter X's. But clearly, for the Democratic Party, they need to make the process look transparent. They need to have a credible process to appoint the new candidate. And also, from the Democrats' point of view, you don't want to look as though you're undermining the entire procedure that actually went through to elect Biden during the primaries initially. So there has to be a degree of authenticity and credibility to the process. However, when you look at the amount of senior Democrats who've come out just overnight endorsing Harris, it does look as though she's going to be tough to beat. What's critical, I think, for her running mate is to find someone who can appeal to voters, particularly in those crucial swing states. Because if we look at all of the polls across the United States, this election is going to be won or lost in 6 or 7 battleground states, including Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin, amongst a few others. And if you can find a running mate, perhaps a governor of one of those states who has good, favorable ratings, that could be an almost ideal running mate for her and will give her some sort of fighting chance against Trump.
I think, Brooks, it was earlier this year when Nikki Haley, a politician in the United States, said the party that would win this election is the one that drops their 80-year-old first. And we all laughed at it. And I'm wondering, if this still rings true, if it is a Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, contest there, does Kamala Harris have what it takes to take Donald Trump on? We've spoken about how popular he is, but she's also of color. She's also a woman, and this is a lot in the United States.
Well, I mean, it's more important perhaps for Democrats than it is for Republicans to have an ethnic and gender balanced ticket in the sense that the Democratic Party is built up out of a series of constituencies. African American, Hispanic American, women are important, young people matter. And Kamala Harris represents obviously she's the child of immigrants, South Asian and Jamaican, respectively. She identifies as an African American of a special kind, shall we say? But in your lead-in, you're talking about the balancing of the ticket. There are people, Governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, or Senator from Arizona, Senator Kelly. Those are logical people as well to join in. You might have said that Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, was a good, solid running mate for a Democratic candidate. It's probably a little too early to have two women on a ticket in the United States. I mean, one will be an adventure, two will be too much at this point. But the dynamic that strikes me as really fascinating, the story has now been switched. It's assuming Kamala Harris is the candidate, she is now going to say, we have the energy and, relatively speaking, the youth, but the experience against a doddering old man in the Republican Party and a callow young man in the Republican Party who's only had about 18 months worth of experience at the government. So the dynamic of what's going to be said in the campaign has become very different all of a sudden.
It's very interesting indeed. Daniel, I want to bring you in here. All around the world, we're seeing world politics either move to the left or to the right. Very little in the middle anymore. I'm keen to find out, when we look at the United States, how do we make sense of those politics there?
Well, I think you're quite right. We are seeing a polarization of electorates. The centre ground isn't necessarily holding. It did hold, by the way, more or less in the United Kingdom. But as we've seen in France and many other European countries, and certainly with the Republicans in the United States, voters are either on the extreme left or, frankly, on the extreme right. In the United States, absolutely, you've seen a drift towards populism. You've seen the Make America Great movement gain traction during the first term of Trump. Now, again, it looks as though it's on steroids if you watched the Republican convention over the last week or so. And certainly voters are becoming more critical of the incumbents. They're looking for populist solutions. In the United States, there's a substantial drift to this sort of Christian nationalism view of the world that Trump and, of course, J.D. Vance brings to the equation as well. This has tremendous implications, of course, for international relations. You've seen the United States look as though it's going to withdraw more into itself, support its friends, be less sympathetic towards those critical of the U.S., and be less interventionist, for that matter, in the outside world. And that has tremendous implications, particularly with a resurgent Russia and even with China looking to flex her muscles. It is, I think, a very complex and changed environment. And what's interesting, of course, is that Harris now offers the Democrats, I suppose, a better chance of at least taking the battle to Trump, because he's certainly emerged in the lead following the assassination attempt and following the successful conference that they've just had. And there are different views of the world. There are different views in which the United States can integrate and relate to the outside world. And this is going to play itself out as well in this campaign.
Before I let you go, Brooks, about 4 months left, based on all the work that Daniel has put out for us today. And of course, just the realities of the fact that Kamala Harris, I think this week, we'll know if she's that Democrat nominee and if she'll take the campaign forward. But 4 months to put her forward and then to put her against Trump and maybe even ahead of Trump, is this a possibility?
Well, I mean, I started to think about this. Obviously, in the last day, we all have to think about it. If there is a second debate between the presumed candidates, Kamala Harris on the one side, Donald Trump on the other, inevitably somebody is going to bill this as the prosecutor versus the felon. Donald Trump was convicted of a felony, and he's under a judgment for some massive amount of money in civil cases. Kamala Harris was a prosecutor in the state of California and attorney general there. And I suspect that she has the capabilities to be much sharper in her retorts and her responses than Joe Biden was. It's going to depend a great deal in the next couple of days whether or not all of the Democrats, the leading Democrats, fall in line behind her. You'll notice that Barack Obama did not yet say he is supporting her candidacy. He gave very nice words about Joe Biden, but he did not specify a favorite among the potential candidates. The Clintons, both Bill and Hillary, did, and several other people. But it's going to be interesting also to see what she does in terms of how she defines her running mate. He presumably he will be someone, as Daniel says, who has to appeal to those swing states, the Arizonas, the New Mexico, Arizonas, the Nevadas, the northern Midwestern states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. All of this is material that over the next couple of days is going to be worked out, but it's all so early to tell yet just how it's all going to matter. There's even the question of the campaign funding, which was raised for the Biden-Harris campaign, and now it's going to be the Harris +1 campaign. And lawyers are starting to wrestle with how, in fact, that money is transferred from the previous campaign to the new one.
Well, we'll be in touch as it all plays out. We've got 4 months to go. Thank you both for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing from you. That was political analyst Daniel Silke and Brooks Spector, retired U.S. diplomat who is with the Daily Maverick.